Today, one of the things we're going to be looking at is whether we've ever come across a house that couldn't be healed. Well, recently I took the opportunity to ask a good friend of mine, Adrian Incledon-Webber, that very same question. Hello there, my name's Tim Walter. I'm a house healer and an alternative life coach. And today what I want to share with you is the final part of the conversation I had with my good friend Adrian Incledon-Webber. Now, Adrian is the author of Heal Your Home and the co-author of Spirit and Earth. That's the book that I wrote with him. Both of those books are available from Amazon in the UK and the USA. Now, this is more of a chat than it is an interview, but what we talked about was, has he come across houses that can't be healed? How is healing a little bit like self-empowerment? Why perhaps we shouldn't always expect a wow when we get involved with spiritual practices and interacting with the subtle realms. And we'll also talk a little bit more about Spirit and Earth and why we wrote that book. So here we are then, having a chat about, first of all, are there houses that can't be healed?
Direct question. Have you ever come across a house that you can't heal?
I would say that it's a weird question. And I would say probably, if you said to me, have you come across a house that you've advised somebody to move from, I can say quite happily yes. Now, that was all to do with man-made energy. So it was all to do with a telephone mast at the end of a cul-de-sac. And whilst the oak tree was up there shading it from the house, the sun was fine. He could just about get away with the energies or the radiation being kicked out. But when the council came along and cut the oak tree down, the guy was frying, and the only time he could ever sleep is when the mother would have to take him in the car and drive him outside the village up into the hills, and he could then get 2 or 3 hours sleep in the car. But then he tried to use some of the practical things, but he said, look, it's a bit like living in a prison cage. He said, the bars up at the window, special paint on the walls, and he said, I can't do it anymore. And I said, look, we can't do anything more. You're going to have to move. But I think from an emotion, if there's any stuck emotions there, any spirits down there, then I would say no. In 99.9% of the cases, you can do work. No, let's bring that back a bit. Maybe sort of 85% of the cases you can do the work and it's going to be successful. But of course, with that 15%, if people don't want to change, then it doesn't matter how much work you do. Perhaps it's a fad. Our friends of ours have had their house healed, let's get ours done. But if they don't want to change, that then becomes very difficult. And you then know after several phone calls that what you've put in place is the best that you can possibly do, or the best that you're allowed to do. And then the family have then got to look at it in their own way and say, maybe 6 months, a year's time, that was great then, we haven't changed, we need to do something about it.
Yeah, I wonder if out of that 15% or so, whether you would say that you had witnessed some improvement but not to the level that you were expecting or that they were expecting.
They were expecting.
Right.
People say, was there a placebo effect to our work? And I would say in some cases, yes. But don't forget, a lot of cases we're working for the one person in the family. The rest of the family don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So if suddenly the children are sleeping better at night, they're less fractious.
Yeah.
The domestic disharmony suddenly becomes harmonious. Not quite overnight, but over several weeks.
Yeah.
The husband's not aware of what you've done. The kids aren't aware. Even the dog or the cat are happy. So maybe to the wife there might be a placebo effect. But I think otherwise, it's difficult because that 15% of people, there will be some changes. And it may be that those changes aren't meant to happen fully for an extra 6, 12 months, 9 months, 10 months, or 2 years down the line. And I do feel that once we've put work in place, it will be work in progress somewhere into the universe. And whether it's the archangels or, the highest of the high, the divine, that actually pushes that little green button to say, right, okay, those people now need to have that work done. I don't know. I've never really thought about it.
It's a very difficult one because I think people ask because some people will ask because they just doubt that it's going to have any effect anyway, that they won't believe that what we suggest can happen. And some people will probably ask just genuinely out of interest. I think that we are torn as the people that are trying to achieve change, I think we're torn by our ego, our self-respect, to say, well, we really want this every 100% to work as we want it to work.
Yep.
But again, we've already said that this is not the modality that we're working in. We're putting a lot upstairs, and cynics would say, well, no, of course you are, because that's what you would say.
Sure.
But, we have to accept that what we're working with is very open to cynicism, and that's fine, because it is unusual.
Yep.
Otherwise, because we're not yet at the stage where everybody's doing it.
Yep.
We will be in the future.
Yes.
But so I think that's very, very good of you to actually to admit to that kind of figure.
But then, being a fixer, as I like to think of myself,
Good point.
I want to kind of go in there and get it all done for them. I mean, I don't want to muck around. I just want to get it all sorted, so they're going to live a much happier, harmonious life. But I guess it may not always be harmonious, You may be responsible for marriage breakups, because there's always a certain amount of self-empowerment goes on with this, whether it's the wife, the husband, the kids, whatever. Things will start to change. So I do warn clients, look, it's going to be for the benefit, but what that benefit might be, that's really up to upstairs to really decide for you.
The sort of concepts that we're talking about is very much about people actually recognising their own power, their own ability to influence things around them through this subtle means, apart from anything else. But also even in very fundamental ways of just taking control of and being exercising self-love, isn't it? In that respect of oneself.
Yes.
And realising that actually a lot of the pain and trauma that you've gone through as a child actually has given, in the most cases, some very warped views of oneself.
Of course.
And so that's what we all have as human beings, or most of us, which we try to move on from.
It is such a shame, because we are all 100% unique human beings. You think uniqueness is priceless. You go and buy a Van Gogh painting, it's going to cost you millions and millions and millions. Well, a human being is actually worth a lot more than a Van Gogh painting. But of course, we don't see ourselves painted that way.
As an adult, you're basically trying to sort out the issues that you got when you were a child.
Yep.
And that's all there is to it. Because even if you don't realise that's what you're doing, trying to live a harmonious life.
Absolutely.
Trying to get on with somebody. You have to overcome the issues, the traumas that you've actually been given.
Yeah. Well, the Buddhists always say that, if you do healing now, it goes back 4 generations.
Yeah.
Well, that's great, but why can't I do it 4 generations ahead, maybe,
Let's come back down to some basics. Tell me a little bit more about the Spirit and Earth book. What's in Spirit and Earth as the book?
I think it was just really trying to help people understand in down-to-earth terms our connection not just with Mother Earth, but also with the spirit world, with the universe. Certainly I know when I did my Reiki many, many, many years ago, you were always taught to connect to spirit, but Mother Earth was never brought into it all. Well, hang on, guys. We're living on the Earth. We're living on the planet. We have a job to do whilst we're here. So it's very important to plug into both. So, use the healing energies of Mother Earth and of nature to be able to also combine it with the healing energies of the universe. You came at it a slightly different way to me, which is great, because the book gives life a much better balance than if I'd have written it myself, or perhaps you'd have written it yourself. But it was a way of introducing people to the angelic realms, the natural realms, the elementals, Paul with his mind mapping that went on, with crystals, meditation, which science has now proved, as you meditate, you start changing your neural networks. Well, we knew that years ago, but of course it's now been proved by science. Science can change its mind, but it's then very difficult for people involved in the healing professions, or whatever we want to call it, to change theirs.
Although, having said that, there in sort of shamanic thinking, there is the great thing about a shaman should not only respect the past traditions, but also tread the future path as well. And I mean, it sounds a terribly grand thing to say, but I think it's really important that we do recognise all of the past healing and all of the changing in thinking. And I think that's what the book starts to sort of say, this is all about sacred sites, and it's about the power that can be found at those places. But also, okay, in the modern 21st century, what can you do with it? Well, actually, you can do quite a lot with it, and it's surprisingly easy.
Yeah.
And that's what we're really saying.
It is, and I think we were also trying to combine things like shamanism with modern day healing.
Yeah.
Because, of course, a lot of Reiki will look at it from Reiki is actually fairly modern compared to, obviously, shamanism, compared to Druidry as well.
Absolutely.
So, of course, a lot of people who, again, it gets segmented, doesn't it? So people who do Reiki, no, well, couldn't possibly do shamanism. People doing shamanism couldn't possibly look at Buddhism or anything else, because it gets all compartmentalised, which I think is such a shame that we have to do that. And I think what we're trying to do, this sounds incredibly grand to say what we're trying to do is bring it all together so that you don't need that, or just that, or just that. You can combine the whole lot. And that's what I try and do. You know, if I think that perhaps a bit of shamanistic work will help with doing some work on somebody's house, in the garden or in the house, then I use that, whether it's that or universal healing or some other stuff that I've learned through reading books on Druidry. It doesn't matter where it comes from. Use it, because it can only be for the person's benefit.
Exactly, because everything that all of the healing that you're doing, and I'm doing, is all done with recognition and acceptance and awareness and requests for the divine intervention, so that the outcome is always done not only for the greatest good and the highest possible purpose, but also absolutely in alignment with the divine will, because otherwise it's possible to get into some very dodgy territory.
It is, absolutely. We both tend to use the words as appropriate when doing the healing work. You know, the outcome will be obviously dictated by upstairs, by the management. It has to be that way because they hopefully, and they do, they know a lot more about this than we do. Otherwise, we wouldn't be allowed to do what we do. To me, if you just keep an open mind about it all and just say, right, you know, if I can use this or I can use that, if I can use a certain crystal or a certain archangel, bring it to bear, because, you know, your problem or my problem would be completely different to the next person's problem. You know, I'm not averse to actually calling in whoever I possibly can to deal with a problem that perhaps I've never come across before.
This is where we sort of start to get our own specializations, if you like, or our own perspective on this work, which every individual house healer, you know, as we train more, each of those individuals is going to have an individual perspective. And the fact is that the right person will go to the right healer in that sense, you know, that kind of magical, fortuitous, synchronicitous way. But so therefore what I am really fascinated by is some of the basic patterns and the basic instances that occur at the basic power centres, because they do have there is a direct cause and effect from individuals. And actually this is not really necessarily in relation to house healing. It's about one's individual perception in one's own home.
Absolutely.
So that's what really excites me about all this, is that, you know, you've taught and you continue to teach a lot of house healing and life improvement. And a lot of that, as we said, is about people understanding their own power. And a lot of that power can be found when you start to understand that actually you've got, you know, there's always somebody that's got your back.
Absolutely.
Because it's there.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, this connection that, you know, it may have been traditionally that we do that through a guide, right?
Yep.
But you can actually get a similar kind of feedback loop going on just within. And I mean, they're there, of course they are, because that is part of being human as well.
Yep.
But this kind of information and to see, if you can dowse, then you can see a change. As you change your thinking, you can see a change in the earth energy.
Absolutely.
And that to me says, right, that's our link here going on. What is going on?
Yep.
That's really powerful and important.
It is, and I think it kind of really boils down to human intent is so amazing. You know, what you can actually do with it, you know, how much you can influence somebody else. In good ways and also bad ways as well. Of course, this is difficult. You know, you have to be so careful with what you're doing. But human intent, you know, like crystals. You know, you put human intent into a crystal. It's a great way to underpin the intent. Yeah. And okay, we're doing this, if you like, 24/7. So I think with the intent that we've got is probably a lot more powerful, and it can actually it's anchored in a much more powerful way than perhaps somebody's doing a normal 9-to-5 job, who will then perhaps get back at night or the next morning, wants to send healing to their mum who's not very well. Yeah. That can last for a few moments.
Yeah.
But if they then sort of programmed a crystal, for instance, and said, right, okay, I'm going to give that to my mum, but that's all the healing work I can possibly send to her in a crystal, that's going to help while she's in a hospital bed or at home. But whereas we could do that quite easily by just sending our thoughts to that person, because it's not that we're sort of any better than anybody else, but in fact we are logging in the mornings, if you like. We're logging into upstairs. We're clicking into Mother Earth.
It's that thing about, it's the simple thing about the more you do it, the more it develops.
Absolutely.
So it's like using a muscle in that sense. It's but it's a, I don't know, whatever you call that. But for sure, and I've seen it, it's tangible, that the more you do the healing work and the more you do any of this subtle energy work, then the more effect it has with less effort.
Absolutely.
There's less effort involved. And that's the same for everybody, even in just meditating, as we were saying earlier on. If somebody decides to start meditating and start to pay attention to the law of attraction and all this stuff, and any of these sort of spiritual type activities, then they will notice and they will start to adjust and they will get in the flow of.
Yeah, but don't forget, they're all going to be expecting that wow.
No, but it isn't a wow.
I know.
It isn't,
That's the problem, because as human beings, we're always taught a bit like taking a pill. You take a magic pill and everything seems better.
Yes. No.
But of course, with meditation, it does take time.
No,
doesn't
it takes a heck of a lot of time.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been doing it for decades.
Yeah.
I started after you, but it has been a surprisingly long time. People do expect a sudden change, and meditation is one of the hardest things, I think, to actually get into the flow of, get into the rhythm of it.
And I think that's why it's important to keep contact with your clients as well, because so you know what they're going through. I know full well what it was like when I was first doing the healing work on myself, and even when I do any healing on a house when I move into it all, I know full well that for a few days I'm going to feel a bit under the weather because things are beginning to change. The energy patterns are changing in not just the house but also with me and with Alison and with the dog. So of course it's good to be able to put yourself through that every now and then so you can actually know what your clients are experiencing. Because it's very easy to be dismissive and say, yeah, they're going to have flu-like symptoms. They're going to feel pretty awful for a few days. But if you can talk to them and reassure them that that's all kind of part of what's going on. And don't forget, you called me in to do this work first and foremost. So, you've invited change to happen. And I think the way that upstairs, for what I see, is as you invite change to happen yourself, it's almost like you're calling on the upstairs to help you. We're perhaps the conduit. But, they will help people who start to help themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very important.
Absolutely. Yeah,